Adam Silver once built his legacy on transparency and progressiveness, guiding the NBA through crises with measured calm. But behind closed doors, he was reportedly warned multiple times about the very corruption that now threatens to dismantle both the NBA and WNBA. Leaked documents reveal the league knew as early as 2020 about illegal betting ties involving players like Terry Rozier, yet opted to quietly manage these issues internally.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Now, with federal agents uncovering patterns of referee manipulation and insider leaks, Silver's approach looks less like leadership and more like calculated neglect. His exit, under the shadow of an investigation, is a damning indictment of the system he was supposed to safeguard. The impact of this scandal isn't abstract. It's deeply embedded in how games were officiated, how outcomes may have been swayed, and how the leagues prioritize financial partnerships over fair play. Referee oversight in the WNBA, already criticized as superficial, now appears complicit in facilitating game manipulation. At a time when women's basketball was gaining legitimacy, the league's credibility is under siege. The message from fans and analysts alike is clear. No more denials, no more optics. What comes next has to be. The first crack appeared when Adam Silver stepped in front of the cameras and called the situation isolated. It wasn't a denial, it was a deflection, a carefully worded maneuver designed to steer the narrative. According to him, the league had been made aware of some concerning behaviors among a few individuals. That was the line. What he didn't mention, a federal investigation had already uncovered a sprawling network of leaks, bets, and manipulated outcomes stretching far deeper than a handful of rogue actors. The NBA commissioner has long cultivated an image of transparency and progressive leadership, especially compared to predecessors. But now, that image is tangled in the most damaging scandal of his tenure. It's no longer just about players on the court. It's about who knew what and when, and how long they chose to look away. On the WNBA side, Kathy Engelbert echoed a similar sentiment. Calm, composed, and measured as always, she maintained that the integrity of the game was intact. But the timing of her statement, suspiciously aligned with Adam Silver's, only raised more eyebrows. The federal probe didn't care for PR-friendly language. Investigators have been pulling records, interviewing referees, and cross-checking betting patterns going back years. Kathy's reassurances rang hollow as the scope of the investigation became public. And when reporters pressed her about specific allegations against WNBA referees, she diverted, citing internal processes. Transparency, it seemed, had a limit, and that limit was now under the FBI's microscope. For years, both leagues had invested heavily in building credibility. The NBA had global reach. The WNBA was finally seeing the recognition it deserved, with rising attendance and sponsorship deals flowing in. But behind closed doors, leadership quietly managed problems without alerting authorities. Referee complaints, suspicious betting spikes, and tip-offs from insiders weren't escalated. They were filed, reviewed internally, and silenced. Now, the federal government wasn't just investigating referees. It was investigating league executives. Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert were no longer just faces of their leagues. They were part of the case. One of the earliest indicators that something bigger was brewing? Terry Rozier. His name came up not once, not twice, but multiple times in sealed documents linked to illegal betting activities. According to internal league memos obtained by investigators, Rozier had been on their radar since at least 2019. Yet instead of involving law enforcement, the NBA allegedly opted to monitor the situation. That decision proved costly. It opened the door for more misconduct, more players feeling emboldened by the league's inaction. Whether Rozier was a major player or just a convenient example, the fact remains, the league knew and did nothing. Officiating in both leagues had already been a source of debate. Missed calls, questionable ejections, and oddly timed technicals weren't new. But what fans didn't know was that behind the scenes, several of those referees had been part of the federal probe. patterns were emerging, calls that aligned suspiciously with large betting movements. In close games, particularly in the WNBA, where one possession could tip the scale, officiating was now under a cloud of doubt. The review process? Toothless. Referees submitted reports. The league said thanks and moved on. There was no third-party verification, no real oversight, which meant corruption could slide right through the cracks, game after game. The impact on players was devastating, especially rising stars like Caitlin Clark, who had become a face of the league's growth. Fans flocked to see her play. Her jersey sales were through the roof. But now, every game she participated in was being re-watched, not for highlights, but for anomalies. There were growing suspicions that the very games used to showcase the league's talent were compromised, not necessarily through players like Caitlin, but through the calls made around them. Favoritism? Possibly. Manipulation? Now, it couldn't be ruled out. For athletes who had worked their whole lives to reach this level, the fallout was deeply personal. And then there were the hits, literal ones. In several high-profile games, Caitlin was on the receiving end of aggressive fouls that went uncalled. Clips circulated online. Fans demanded answers. Commentators began asking, is this just sloppy officiating or something darker? If a player's treatment on the court could be influenced by off-court betting interests, then the sports foundation was fractured. The difference between a missed call and a rigged one was no longer clear, and the league's silence only made it worse. At the center of it all sat the elephant in the room, sports betting. The NBA and WNBA had signed major deals with DraftKings and FanDuel. These weren't minor partnerships. They were foundational revenue sources. And with that money came questions of influence. How could a league that profits from betting also be trusted to police it? Investigators were asking the same thing. Were calls made to protect point spreads? Were lineups leaked before tip-off to favorite insiders? The conflict of interest was glaring, and fans were starting to see it. Folder not found. Create new folder. DraftKings and FanDuel. For the WNBA, the timing couldn't be worse. The league had just come off a record-breaking season. Viewership was up. Investment was growing. But the investigation dragged all of that into the mud. Kathy Engelbert tried to maintain the image of a league on the rise. But behind the scenes, sponsors were asking questions, and fans were losing faith. If officiating was compromised, were any of those big wins even real? Was the momentum authentic or manufactured? Those weren't just rhetorical questions. They were now being asked in courtrooms and boardrooms. Meanwhile, Adam Silver's strategy seemed to be minimize and move on. He appeared on camera again, saying he trusted the process. But trust was the very thing slipping away. Evidence from the investigation contradicted his statements. Emails, call logs, and betting records suggested league officials had been aware of misconduct far earlier than they admitted. And yet, there was no apology, no accountability, just reassurances that the league would do better. But better than what? Better than hiding federal-level corruption until it exploded into public view? That bar was low. And for fans who had believed in the purity of the game, it was a betrayal that couldn't be undone. The gravity of the scandal hit hardest when whispers became headlines. Kathy Engelbert was no longer issuing measured statements. She was in damage control mode. By the time the FBI confirmed the depth of its probe, Kathy was facing pointed questions she could no longer sidestep. How many referees were involved? How far back did the league know? What did they do when they found out? Each time she responded, the answers got vaguer. She leaned on phrases like continuing to evaluate and committed to fairness, but that wasn't enough. Fans weren't looking for branding, they wanted receipts. And every time she tried to reassure the public, it just reminded everyone how deep the rot went. The emotional fallout was becoming impossible to ignore. Players like Caitlin Clark, whose ascent had sparked so much hope for the WNBA, were now stuck answering for things they had nothing to do with. In interviews, Caitlin looked drained, not from the physicality of the game, but from the cloud of controversy hanging over it. Her performances were still top tier, but every three-pointer, every no-look pass, felt tainted by the possibility that the outcome of her games might have already been shaped behind the scenes. She wasn't just playing the opponent, She was battling a system fans were starting to distrust. When Adam Silver took the podium again, there was an undeniable shift. Gone was the calm confidence. In its place, frustration. He called the federal investigation unfortunate and distracting. But the truth was, it was unavoidable. Too much had come out. Internal reports showed knowledge of problematic behavior going back years. And not just vague incidents, but specific instances of data leaks, betting anomalies, and referee misconduct. At one point, Silver was asked directly if league officials had participated in suppressing information. He didn't say no. He said, "We're reviewing all internal processes." That's not denial. That's a dodge. In game footage, subtle cues started to feel ominous. A missed travel here, an inexplicable tech there. It wasn't about isolated mistakes anymore. It was about patterns. Analysts pored over film, comparing calls to live betting lines. Correlations started stacking up. In tight WNBA games where the spread hovered under 5 points, calls in the final minutes skewed in suspiciously consistent directions. Some were still hesitant to say the word rigged. But let's be honest, when enough weird coincidences pile up, they stop looking like coincidences. They start looking like strategy. And behind the curtain? Billions of dollars in sports betting revenue. DraftKings and FanDuel weren't just partners, they were power brokers. Their influence shaped marketing campaigns, data rights deals, and in some cases, the public narrative around the sport itself. The conflict was baked in. The same leagues responsible for maintaining competitive fairness were now deeply tied to companies that profited when game outcomes tilted one way or another. That kind of entanglement isn't just messy, it's dangerous. Regulators raised concerns years ago. Ethics experts flagged the partnership model early, but the league shrugged it off. They framed betting as fan engagement. Now that engagement is turning into subpoenas. Together, Silver and Engelbert had painted themselves as modern reformers. Progressive, inclusive, forward-thinking. But this scandal exposed the limits of their leadership. It wasn't just about being unaware, it was about what they knew, when they knew it, and what they chose to do with that knowledge. The cozy relationship between league leadership and betting interests made accountability impossible. Internal investigations weren't real investigations, they were PR shields. Independent oversight was non-existent. And the people who were supposed to enforce the rules were also writing them. In private meetings, Kathy Engelbert reportedly tried to calm sponsors by blaming a small group of officials for the mess. But federal documents told a different story. Multiple referees, several franchises, patterns of cover-ups, and coordination that spanned years, not months. She wasn't just managing a scandal. She was managing a crumbling narrative. A league built on hard-fought legitimacy was now at risk of becoming a cautionary tale. And what did the players get in return? Silence, vague reassurances, no transparency, not even a timeline for reform. It was starting to feel like everyone involved in the actual sport had been left out of the conversation entirely. Caitlin Clark's face became symbolic, not just of rising stardom, but of a league trapped between growth and decay. She didn't sign up for this. She wasn't leaking game plans or talking to insiders. But now, every time she took the court, people questioned the outcome before the game had even started. Commentators speculated on bias. Fans pointed out miscalls. Conspiracy threads multiplied. And through it all, Caitlin kept showing up, kept playing, but the joy was dimmed. It's hard to thrive when you're constantly asked if your success is even real. Adam Silver finally made a move. He announced the formation of a special integrity unit. It sounded impressive until it came out that the unit would report directly to NBA leadership. So, no independence, no third-party oversight, just more internal reviews by the same people who already looked the other way. The announcement backfired. Instead of restoring confidence, it exposed how little the league was willing to change. Critics called it cosmetic. Some fans called it insulting. But what it definitely wasn't, reassuring. Silver's public image took a hit. The man once seen as basketball's steady hand now looked like a CEO protecting a brand, not a commissioner protecting the game. The ripple effect hit the sportsbooks, too. With the investigation dragging out, both DraftKings and FanDuel came under fire for their role in enabling the culture. Regulators started asking hard questions. Should leagues be allowed to partner with companies that benefit from insider leaks? Where's the line between data partnership and pay-to-play? There was no good answer. The business model that made everyone rich was also the one that made the whole system fragile. When integrity dies, so does trust. And when trust dies, so does the game. Kathy Engelbert knew this wasn't going away. The scandal had legs, long ones, and the longer she stayed quiet or vague, the louder the questions got. There were too many holes in the timeline. Too many whistleblowers saying they'd raised alarms, only to be ignored. Every day without real answers was another day fans started to believe the worst. Behind the scenes, internal league emails were leaked. They showed early concerns flagged as far back as 2020, referees with strange patterns, teams under investigation, and officials with connections to known betting intermediaries. Yet when those concerns reached the top, they were met with nothing. We'll look into it. We're monitoring. No alerts to federal agencies. No suspensions. No action. Just quiet containment. That containment didn't last. Not when replay footage from key games started surfacing online. Clips that had been shrugged off suddenly took on new meaning. Why did that blatant foul get missed? Why was that travel waved off with a nod? It wasn't just bad officiating anymore. It was motive. Analysts dug in deeper. In high-profile matchups that drew heavy betting attention, the officiating patterns were impossible to ignore. Calls that swayed momentum, favored one team's spread, or conveniently shifted the scoreline at critical betting thresholds. And yet, those referees? Still active. Still officiating. Still, Adam Silver came out again, this time visibly frustrated. The press conference was clipped, almost confrontational. He claimed the league was being unfairly scrutinized and that most of the media coverage was sensationalized. But no one was buying it, because the facts weren't going away. Multiple franchises had been flagged. Dozens of betting anomalies. Player agents caught communicating with suspicious third parties. And now, Silver was acting like the real problem was the reporting. That move only added fuel to the fire. If your leadership plan is to downplay a federal investigation, maybe don't get caught contradicting your own statement from last year, especially not when those contradictions are sitting in court documents. Meanwhile, DraftKings and FanDuel maintained radio silence. No statements, no interviews, just business as usual. They were still promoting player parlays and live in-game betting, even as the integrity of those games was being dismantled in real time. It didn't take a genius to see the problem. If a betting partner profits off every second of game chaos, then controversy isn't a threat, it's a product. The more unpredictable the game, the more bets fly in. And unpredictability? That's easy to engineer when referees are compromised and league oversight is paper-thin. These companies were embedded, too embedded, and the leagues had invited them in. Now, they couldn't separate themselves from the rot because they'd helped build the system that allowed it. For players like Caitlin Clark, the spotlight had become a curse. She was asked to speak for a league that couldn't explain itself. After one game, a reporter asked if she trusted the referees. She paused. That silence said more than any press release. She had come into the WNBA during a moment of unprecedented hype. Record-breaking crowds, national coverage, the promise of a new era. And now, the questions weren't about her game. They were about the system collapsing around her, the one that was supposed to protect the sport she loved. When Adam Silver and Kathy Engelbert finally appeared together again, the optics were tense. No jokes, no camaraderie, just a stiff joint statement emphasizing collaboration with authorities and commitment to reform. Too little, too late. Fans didn't want statements. They wanted resignations. The FBI was still interviewing witnesses. Subpoenas were still going out. And no amount of choreographed PR could paper over the fact that league executives were now squarely in the line of fire. Behind them, years of spin were unraveling. The facade of professionalism, the illusion of fairness, all of it built on a foundation they quietly allowed to crack. More games were reviewed, more calls dissected, and suddenly, the trend was obvious. Officiating wasn't just bad. It was predictably bad. Patterns showed referees consistently favoring certain teams late in close games. A few whistleblowers suggested those referees were fed insider information on which betting lines needed protection. The FBI's data team tracked in-game betting spikes that aligned eerily with those calls. Not just once, repeatedly. It wasn't just fan speculation anymore. It was forensic evidence. So now, the league wasn't just facing PR blowback. It was facing federal liability, the kind that doesn't fade with a few suspensions and a strongly worded memo. Kathy Engelbert eventually addressed the public solo again. The usual calm tone was replaced by something shakier. For the first time, she acknowledged that processes had failed. She mentioned trust being broken. But again, no names, no timelines, no specific actions. The most alarming part? She still refused to say how many referees had been pulled, or if any executives were placed on leave. The word accountability floated in the air, but never landed. By now, even longtime supporters were turning. The WNBA had fought hard to earn its legitimacy, and this scandal felt like betrayal, not just by the perpetrators, but by the leaders who let it fester. At the root of all of it, money, betting revenue, profit margins, league partnerships worth tens of millions. That's what kept everyone looking the other way, until the FBI forced them to look. DraftKings and FanDuel didn't just offer betting. They offered data packages, insider analytics, real-time injury updates, all things that were later used to manipulate betting outcomes. And the leagues? They gave them the keys. Every handshake deal with these companies added another layer of conflict. And now, the reckoning is here. Congressional hearings are rumored. Regulators are circling. And the question being asked, loudly and by everyone, is simple. How did this go on for so long without anyone stepping in? Caitlin Clark's next game was different. You could feel it, not just in the arena, but on social media, in the commentary, even in the silence between plays. There was a weight to everything. Every call got side-eyed. Every missed whistle sparked debate. She played well. She always does. But you could see in her body language, this wasn't just basketball anymore. It was damage control. She didn't sign up to be the league's unofficial spokesperson in a federal scandal. But that's where things landed. And it wasn't. As pressure mounted, Adam Silver's silence grew heavier. The man who once held global press conferences to explain rule changes now avoided direct questions. Every reporter wanted to know the same thing. Why didn't the league act when the signs were right there? Whistleblowers had flagged referees. Betting analysts sent alerts. Even former players raised concerns. Yet nothing changed. Silver's reputation as a modern, level-headed commissioner had taken a hit that no media spin could patch up. This wasn't just a blemish. It was a collapse in credibility. And when the suggestion was raised, would he resign? His response wasn't a no. It was, we're focused on next steps. Not exactly a vote of confidence. Kathy Engelbert closed her last public appearance with a line that felt almost too ironic. We believe in the integrity of our sport. But at this point, belief wasn't enough. The investigation had laid bare the cracks in the system, and belief alone couldn't fix what leadership chose to ignore for years. Fans weren't asking for perfection. They were asking for honesty. For someone to say, yes, we got it wrong. Yes, we should have acted sooner. But the silence spoke louder than any press release ever could. What's left now is a league in free fall, a commissioner in hiding, and a scandal that's not just a bad headline. It's a fundamental question about whether any of this has been real. So now it's on us, on you, the fans, the ones who believed. Ask the questions. Demand the truth. And don't settle for half answers just because they come with a logo. If this shook you, share it. If you followed the game and felt something was off, comment below. If you want the leagues to know that silence isn't going to cut it anymore, subscribe and stay tuned. Because this story, it's just getting started.